Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Dr. Faheem, tell us, when did you first make a discovery of how serious this disease was? Also, when did you find your first patient of COVID?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for 20 years and I've gone through H1N1 pandemic. Believe it or not, that was a pandemic, and Ebola and Zika and SARS in 2003. And interestingly, I was in Pakistan in this January when this pandemic had technically already started. It hadn't hit the global level at that time. In February, I remember sitting with someone and a good friend asked me, "What do you think about this coronavirus? This is nothing, right?" And I told him, I said, "No, I think this is very real. And it's coming. I'm actually surprised why there is not a lot of discussion about it in the media." And then on 8th of March is when I saw my first patient. And from there on, we've seen hundreds of patients by now, and it has literally taken us through the ringer.
Please describe that discovery, your first patient. Take us back to the day and the moment.
Sure. So it was a Sunday and I was home. I was off that weekend, but we were preparing for COVID for almost a month. We had started our preparation in the hospital since February. So we knew one day it's gonna hit us. But I didn't expect us, because we are a system of 13 hospitals and we are a little removed from major airports. So we always joked, our CEO actually, he was joking. He said, "Look, we are farther from international airport. The downtown hospitals will probably get hit first and then we will see patients." On this Sunday afternoon around 11:30, 12:30, I get a call from the hospital saying, "We think we have our first COVID patient." It gave me goosebumps because you never forget your first patients.
So, what is this mystique of this virus? You can be 80-year-old. In India, we have cases of 92, 93, 95-year-olds who come out waving to medical staff and everybody celebrates. And then you have people who are very young and who just get knocked over.
I think we need to think in terms of probabilities and not anecdotes. So
Right.
as physicians, there's always an 80-year-old who'll come to me and he said, "Doc, I've smoked all my life and lung cancer didn't come near me." That does not mean smoking does not cause lung cancer. That just tells me you got lucky.
Yeah.
So the reality is, if you look at the composite of a population, still those who are elderly, those who are obese, who have high blood pressure, diabetes, they are still at a much higher risk. And those who are young, they are at a lower risk. That does not mean that no young person will die. Maybe it's one in a million, but if we start focusing on that one, we can make it look like anything. So
Right.
the probability is still higher for those age groups that I just mentioned, but everyone is equally susceptible to this virus. If 100 people went to a wedding and there was a highly infectious person there, chances are anyone who shakes hands with that person, whether you're 10 years old or 90 years old, chances are you're going to catch it.
Science, journal Science has a paper that says that one reason India is seeing such a heavy spread is that super spreaders are not in control. So, will you explain a little bit about what are super spreaders, how to handle them, and what makes them different?
Sure. So anything I say today is subject to change because this is such a dynamic topic and we're learning every day. So there are super spreader patients and then there are super spreader events. Current theory is that if I am infected and I have a very high viral load, then at a certain stage of my disease, usually a day before I develop symptoms to a day or two after, when I'm most contagious. So if I take a flight at that time and I'm not wearing a mask and I'm coughing and sneezing around in that plane, chances are I'm going to spread it to a lot of people. Or if I go and attend a wedding at that time, or if I go in any indoor space, if I go there, I'm likely to infect a lot of people. Second is super spreader events. This again is if in a church or a mosque or a temple you're having 1,000 people for a religious ceremony, because they're huddled together for a long period of time, very emotional, sometimes singing, all those hugs and the camaraderie, that event can become a super spreader event. So any indoor event, whether that's a wedding, remember this virus has no faith, it has no politics. All it cares is, are you human beings and are you huddled together? Great, I'm in business. First of all, we need to understand that this is a spectrum. This is not a light switch that's on or off. This is like a dimmer, that you can go a little high, you can dial up, you can dial down. So this is a spectrum. There is no right or wrong answer. There are 10 possible answers, number one. Number two, when it comes to surfaces, if you're working in a COVID unit or in a hospital where they have hundreds of COVID patients, yes, it's very likely that you can catch it from a surface. And that is why we wear PPE. That is why we have enhanced cleaning and disinfection in a hospital, because the chances are much higher. At the other extreme is if you're living at home without a COVID patient, your chance of catching it from a surface is nearly zero because there is no source. There's no one in your house. Where is the virus going to come from? So, and even if it comes from a mailman or a milkman or someone, the chances are it's just going to die in a few hours. I know people always quote that one study from New England Journal. They argue with me over Twitter. I never respond to arguments, by the way.
So did people in Pakistan also, your friends, your teachers, say, "Bhai, kya kar rahe ho? Faheem Younus, tum brain drain kara rahe ho. Zarurat to yahan par hai."
Oh, yes, that is true. So one of my role model teachers, Dr. Faisal Masood, may Allah bless his sweet soul, he passed away prematurely, in my opinion. When he used to hear us take our USMLE exams and leave, I still remember Faisal Saab used to typically talk in English or Punjabi. He rarely talked Urdu, at least I don't remember much. So when he heard, he said, "Puttar ji, batti othe balo jithe hanera hove. Jithe pehle inniyan battiyan baldiyan, othe batti balan da ki fayda?" Essentially saying, "Oh son, go light a lamp where there is some darkness, where there are already millions of lamps. What's the point of lighting another lamp there?" Essentially, he was saying, why do you want to go to America where they have so many doctors? And that stuck with me for a while. And when you're here, it's very difficult to figure out ways to give back. I can't just go back to Pakistan for 3 months every year and work there. So this pandemic, in a very strange way, reminded me of what Faisal Saab said. And as I got to talk and educate people about it, I really felt that it was just God's grace that he gave me the ability to light a lamp in Peru, in Paraguay, in Mexico, in India, in Pakistan. People sometimes respond to me, they say, "I live in a village, I have nothing here. So I'm just following your tweets and this is keeping me safe." So, I think I'm very, very grateful that there is an opportunity and, we are trying to contribute whatever we can. I think they're very brave souls. The doctors, nurses in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, these countries, I have huge admiration for them. They're literally making huge sacrifices. So I have respect and admiration for them. But social media, I came home after that March 8th. I was getting so many calls from all over the world. My friend, my faith community, my family, and people had questions, what if, what if, what if, what if? And I was pulling 14-hour days at work. There was no way I was going to be able to get back to them in a timely fashion. And usually people who know me, they know that I'm responsive. I would get back to you in a timely fashion. So I was actually talking to my family one day, really sharing my guilt. Look, I feel horrible because all of these family members must be thinking, "Oh, what a jerk. I need him now and he's not responding to me." So my daughter casually said, "Baba, you are on Twitter, so why don't you tweet some of the common questions and let them know so they can find information there. So it'll be a little efficient for you." So as I'm sitting in my living room, it was around 8:39, whatever time at night. So I said, all right, I know that these 10 questions are popping up all the time. Let me answer them. I put those 10 questions on Twitter, and then I just go with my life. And I think late that night or next morning, I look at it and they have gotten 10,000 retweets. And I'm quite surprised. And then another few hours later, 20,000, 40,000, they got like 100,000 retweets. And those tweets were seen by like 20 million people. And that allowed me to then realize that, look, there's an opportunity here. A lot of people are hurting, not just my family member. A lot of people all over the world are confused. And as physicians, you're trained for that thing. When you see a mass of patients, you can't just say, "I'm tired, I'm going to go home." You try to take care of that. So I think that's what I've been doing.
I have Professor Afrozul Haq of Jamia Hamdard in Delhi, who wants to know a further question on the vaccine. That how long do you think will this immunity or the antibodies that the vaccine gives us last?
Again, great question. We don't know that answer. What we do know is it typically will last much longer than a natural infection. Now the question is how much longer natural infection lasts. We don't know that either. Studies are showing that the antibodies trail off by 3 to 4 months, but that's a misleading information. People feel that means in 4 months immunity goes away. That's wrong because you have T cell immunity, B cell immunity. Human body is pretty smart. You
Yeah.
can't make it a fool twice easily. So what happens is previous coronaviruses, previous seasonal viruses typically give you a 1 to 2 year immunity. And if this virus is also naturally going to give us 1 to 2 year immunity, that will be awesome. And if vaccine gives us, let's say, 2 year immunity, I personally believe that is enough to crush this virus and this pandemic. Once again, remember, the goal is not to eliminate this virus completely. The goal is to make it irrelevant. H1N1 that came out in 2009 and 10 is still around. Believe it or not, I still see patients who occasionally get H1N1, but it's not in the news, it's irrelevant. So once we hit it to the point where coronaviruses just become 0.5%, it'll become irrelevant and life will move on.
Why are we not so focused on finding an antiviral for COVID? And why are we not making such progress there as we might have done, say, with H1N1? These viruses are cousins.
Gee, Gupta Sahab, I probably look at it differently. I think there's an immense amount of progress made on treatments, and I'll tell you how. On 8th of March, when we saw that first patient, now looking back, we treated her completely wrong. We did not know how to treat her. Back then, we thought that everybody should get on a ventilator quickly so they can survive and not spread the virus. Now, after Italy and New York and Spain and what happened there in Seattle, we know a few things very, very clearly. We use anticoagulations because we know that this virus causes blood clots, so we use blood thinners. We use dexamethasone because the registry trial from UK shows that if you use that on patients who need oxygen, that their survival increases.
That's very cheap.
Then it's very cheap and available. And then remdesivir is a drug that we use intravenously, which also shortens the illness. There are other drugs like immunoglobulin synthetically made that also help. Plasma, whether it helps or not, there are some conflicting reports on it. The data keeps changing, but we're still learning about it. I personally believe it will work. We just don't know the right patient, the right time, the right amount of antibodies. So we're sort of using it in a crude way. So we have so many modalities now, and it's not just a list of things. If you look at the outcomes, the ICU mortality for COVID has gone down by 30 to 40%. To give you perspective, sepsis is a condition which is a blood infection. And over the past 30, 40 years, sepsis mortality has not gone down by 30%. Over 30 years.
There is Mr. BBN Rao, who works in a key position with GMR Group. GMR Group owns the big airports, Delhi, Hyderabad, and is building more. So he says, is herd immunity the only feasible way to fight the current pandemic in a country like India, considering the current vaccine development efforts and economic situation of a country like India? How far is that?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think it'll be different for different countries because I know India is your Pune Institute is working on a massive vaccine. So, but you also have a massive scale. The question is going to be which vaccine is most effective, which vaccine is safest, which vaccine requires refrigeration, and which vaccine can just be transported more easily, which vaccine, there are just so many variables. Is it going to be one dose versus two doses? And which vaccine gets approval at what time? And I know I'll come to the answer, but this is not just a simple, once again, it's not a light switch. So what will happen is currently the understanding is that the vaccine may start getting approval by the end of this year to early next year. Then will come your first responders or your high risk populations. By the time it gets to Shekhar Gupta Saab, it may be another year, it may be another 8 months. It may be another 18 months. And by the time you vaccinate the whole world, technically at that 70%, that may be 3 years. So I think these are large timelines, and it's important, and I don't say this to scare people. I think it is important for us to know how far it is, right? So that will enhance the value of those three things: mask, wash your hands, and avoid crowds. Because if you did all three of them consistently, they're probably just as good as a vaccine.
Tell us a few examples from your experience on this kind of patient you would have.
Sure. Sure. So I still remember this lady who came from a prison, actually. She was in her 40s and she was on a ventilator. Her lungs were completely shot. And every weekend when I would come home, I thought in back of my mind, I don't know if she'll be alive on Monday when I go back. And every week she hung in there. She stayed with us for 52 days, almost 2 months, right? Out of those 52 days, probably 40 days on a ventilator. And one day on a weekend, I receive a text from one of the nurses with a picture of someone sitting in the sun. And she says, "Dr. Younus, do you recognize this person?" And I said, "I honestly don't." And then she put the name underneath. This is secure texting that we can do as physicians. So she said, "This is that patient. I brought her outside today so she could sit in the sun." I could not believe she walked home after 52 days in the hospital. So we've seen a lot of miracles. And by the way, I want to make sure that that patient, I don't think survived because of our treatment. She, once again, there were 100 things that went right. And the kudos to our nurses. They just did an amazing job taking care of her. So there are so many stories like this of patients that we thought were very unlikely to survive, but they did.
I have a question from my colleague Sajid Ali Mir, who's been coordinating with you and setting this up. So Sajid wants to know, what is more dangerous, a pandemic or people in power believing in conspiracy theories? People who are actually in powerful positions like your president. Now that you are in Washington, I say your president.
Sure. Sure. In general, I think ignorance is always more dangerous than a pandemic. A pandemic will come and go. Ignorance will here to stay. So in general, conspiracy theory or arrogance or ignorance, I try not to point out people, not because I'm scared of them, just because it's just my style. I like not to go after any single person, because I also believe that every saint has a past and every Satan, has a future. People can change.
People like Donald Trump. I mean, from day one, he's been standing in front of cameras and reading out names of prescription drugs in a country like America, where it's an outrage. It's not India or Pakistan where you can go to a chemist and buy anything.
Yeah, I think this is the issue, that research always shows that politicians try to calm people by giving them good information, which they feel is good. The reality is we all need to have deference to expertise. I cannot just run a journalistic show like Gupta Saab you're doing. I'll be a mess if I was trying to do your job. It may look very easy. What are you doing here? Just asking a few questions, right? To an average person, that may look very easy, but you know that you're a Tendulkar of your profession, right?
Oh,
and I
wow.
keep cricket or whatever, right? But yeah, I keep going to cricket. But yes, there was a time I was deeply in love with cricket. Then I divorced it.
That's a delight chatting with somebody from our region, because your cricketing metaphor can be so easily used.
Agreed. So that is why. But I think that in general, yeah, there should be deference to expertise. As a physician, I should talk about infectious diseases. I should not get into politics. A politician shouldn't get into economics. An economics person shouldn't get into defense. And unfortunately, that's what happens when there is a pandemic. All of a sudden, everybody's become an expert on it. And I'm like, look, guys, I understand you're well-intentioned, but please swim in your own lane, because otherwise we'll create a lot of confusion.